So everyone, this is one of my dearest friends and longtime colleagues, Michael Futterman. Michael is a brilliant individual, 20 years as a coach, consultant, learning and development expert. He's got a master's of organizational psychology from Columbia. Now, Michael, as I said, is a coach, and we're excited to bring him onto the platform. So you all get the opportunity to work with Michael, experience his brilliance, hopefully have some time with him one-on-one. And what he does, and what I think is so brilliant, is that he helps people really shift from what is to what is possible. And we've talked a lot about understanding the truth about where you are today versus where it is that you want to go in the future. And Michael, I just believe that you are one of the best at helping people to get there. So thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you. I wish that every time I got an introduction, it was as glowing as that one. So I feel really honored and humbled by the opportunity to be on this with you. And I'm grateful for, what you and I have built over the years.
One of the things that's happened for you and I over the last couple of months, and even maybe let's say like the last year, is this idea of reinvention. And so I wanted you to come on to our call today to talk to our audience about this idea of longevity and being intentional and really thinking about where it is that you want to go in the future, and then assessing the habits that you have that play a role in making sure that we age with grace, right? When we think about longevity, we think about not just how long are we going to live, but the quality of the life that we have there. And this idea that if we want to live a truly wealthy life, that we've got to not just think about maybe the dollars and cents in our pocketbook, but what we are doing to make ourselves healthier human beings. So tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, well, I've been playing in this space for a long time. My undergraduate degree, actually my diploma, which is buried somewhere in the closet or something. I don't have it
ask you
hanging
if you
anywhere.
knew where that is.
No, I don't have it hanging anywhere, but it does say recreation on it. That was my major in my undergraduate degree. And I've been a big fan of embracing play and trying to stay young at heart, and then also young mentally. I crave learning and learning new skills and learning new information. That's just been part of who I am for the time that I've been on the planet. So I'm happy to share with the audience that I'm a ripe old age of 52. And this is at the point in my life where I can start to see the retirement, or at least the age that people typically quote retire. And I put quotes around that because I think that the idea of retirement is shifting and changing. People embracing more lifelong learning, people embracing more giving back and continuing to work, even if it's not at the vocation that they've been in for the majority of their working lives. So I can see that peeking over the horizon. And in addition with that, I've got two young boys who are 15 and 16. So they're in high school. One of them just got his first paying job. So watching him enter the workforce and start to explore what does working mean for me, and what is that gonna mean for me in the future, learning new skills, that sort of stuff. And then also I've got both of my parents. I'm very fortunate. Both of my parents are still with me. And my mother still continues to work. She's a social worker. She sees patients privately. And my dad has recently retired after 50 years of being a practicing ophthalmologic surgeon. So I'm kind of seeing what the future could look like. I'm also experiencing it for myself after leaving a more what you might describe as sort of a 9-to-5 working for an employer type of job, to starting my own practice and my own business, and starting to reimagine and configure my thoughts and beliefs about what is possible in terms of earning a living currently, but then also what might retirement look like for me. So all of the stuff that we did in preparation for this conversation here, Lindsay, I think is really things that have been on my mind. Whether it's the physical part of getting older, or the mental part of just thinking about our lives differently. So I'm really excited. I hope that gives your audience a a sense of what I'm about and what I might be able to add some insight to in this conversation.
Yeah, I think that brilliant for our audience is the personal experiences that you're having and what you're going through, but then also that coupled with your professional experience and all of your expertise. And I know that you are a continuous learner. You do a lot of what I would consider biohacking, and you're thinking a lot about your health in a way that some others aren't or are just starting to think about. And so I think that blend together of you're not just somebody who knows the things, but you're actually applying them. How do you live life as you age with the kind of intention that you desire? If we're looking at the mean age of an individual retiring, it's 61, and a 65-year-old woman has a 50% chance of reaching it to, let's call it age 87. Right? It's 86.8, but let's just call it 87. And a 65-year-old man has the 50% chance of making it to 84. So, one, how do we boost those numbers? How do we live longer? But then how do we make sure that we live a really high quality life? Because if we're going to be retired for 20 plus years and we aren't able to live life the way that we desire to live, let's say you are in your 60s, or, Michael, you're 55. So 52.
Hey, I'm 52.
You're 52. Sorry, I'm aging you. But you're thinking about this a little bit more so than I am, at least in my own personal life, sitting down with my clients and helping them figure it out. But you're also seeing your parents go through part of this right now. So how do you increase the age in which we live? We also know that 80% of those that are over the age of 50 are going to die from one of what we call the 4 horsemen. And those are type 2 diabetes, heart disease, neurodegenerative disease, and then cancer. And so we've got all of these statistics, which are kind of scary. So let's maybe start with some of the science and the fact behind this, just so we can give our audience an idea of like what we're working with in general. But then we're going to end our session today. The bulk of what we're talking about is really, what are the things that we can do, right? What are the things that are easy to do that maybe we aren't doing today? And how do we increase that likelihood of reaching it to 100? And making sure that the time that we live is the quality that we want it to be.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of those 4 horsemen here for just a second.
Yeah. I think that's it. Just thinking about what you were saying, I think that's the big thing, is that people are going to live longer through the power of medicine and the power of the genetic pool, the strength of the genetic pool, and people exercising more and doing some of the things that we're talking about. People are going to live longer. That's Absolutely. Not the question. It's the question of, are you going to be living longer with a quality of life that you are going to enjoy, rather than have to spend on healthcare.
Right. Again, that's the intersection between wealth and health.
Yeah,
like how
absolutely.
do you truly live that wealthy, rich life, which includes being able to do the things that you want to do. So, Michael, let's dive in, right? Let's talk about some of the things that we can do in order to improve our overall longevity, especially as it pertains to the 4 horsemen. You and I have done a lot of work in the area of brain health, and a lot of work in the area of creating more energy in yourself. So really what we're going to be talking about today pulls from our experience in, I think, 5 key areas. So we've got the physical dimension of self. We've got really more of that emotional dimension of self. How is the quality of your mind? We've got the mental. We've also got the social and how we're interacting with other people and the importance of that. And then we've also got this dimension of purpose and what we need to do in order to take action and stay taking action, even in the face of all of the things that are happening in our life. Right. So let's start with physical, right? What would you say are the 3 kind of high levels inside of the physical that we need to be paying attention to?
Yeah. And this is, I don't think, for our audience, I think you're going to hear a lot of stuff in this that you've heard before. If this is the first time that you're hearing that you should get up and move around, or that you should be aware of your emotions and that affects your health, then what are you listening to? Like like this is everywhere. It's on the pages of USA Today, everywhere from the pages of USA Today to JAMA, the Journal of American Medicine. So with physical, movement, eating, and sleeping, right? So we have to get up and move. Our bodies are designed for it. And the good news is that we're living longer. The challenge with that is that our bodies biologically have really, it takes a while for our bodies to catch up. And the wear and tear that we put on our bodies more and more is more extreme and more challenging, right? Our cave people did not have, they didn't have skateboarding to have to contend with their snowboarding. You don't need to be the Rock. What you can do is really, we're looking for, daily movement,
Consistency.
20 to 30 minutes, right, of moving your body. And I know that you've got some stats here around this idea of zone 2 work. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Zone 2 exercise is really low key exercise. It's where you're elevating your heart rate enough where you tend to be able to have a strained conversation. So it wouldn't be easy for you to get out the words, but you can have full sentences. And so for some people, that might be a brisk walk. For other people, that might be a light jog. For others, that might be cycling at a very low cadence, right? So again, if you can have a conversation, it's a little bit strange, but you're not gasping for air. You're able to hold a discussion with somebody. That's really zone 2. Adding zone 2 workouts where you can have 150 to 180 minutes of zone 2 a week. That's really going to do a lot for your increasing your metabolic function. So having everything just process better, thinking about how your food gets processed, how the nutrients are distributed throughout your body and into your cells. And then also thinking about how to improve your VO2 max. So that's as you age, right? If you're trying to walk up a hill, it takes a certain VO2 max in order to do that without losing your breath.
Something as simple as being able to haul your suitcase up into the overhead bin, or throw the bag of dog food over your shoulder, or bring in the bags of groceries from the store. Like, these may seem like really simple things today, but think about the quality of life that you want to have, and the sense of self-sufficiency.
A little bit more about how we want to fuel our body in order to keep our brains healthy as we age, and then also make sure that we are maintaining healthy muscle mass. Because if we think about, the importance of strength training, one of the things, we lose 3 to 8% of our muscle mass per decade after the age of 30, which I just think is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
So, even if you are working out, you're still going to be losing some of your muscle mass. So what we need to do is not only strength training in order to maintain that, but then also fuel our body with protein in order to maintain healthy muscle mass.
As far as fueling, the other thing that people often ask, or that we find in our work with people around this topic, is they're like, well, what should I eat?
Yeah.
Should I fast? Should I not fast? Should I eat a keto diet? Should I do this? I think the general,
what's the best one?
you're gonna have to work with your own physiology. Only diet that I think is applicable to all physiologies, unless you have some crazy food allergy to some of the stuff, is the Mediterranean diet. So eating foods that are recognizable, really heavily weighted
Not
in
out
the
of a
area.
can?
Not out of a can. Something, if it's got a lot of ingredients on it, and you can't pronounce them, it's probably not a good idea. So legumes, there's research about eating dark leafy greens, so kales and collards and other greens like that are dense in antioxidants, and then limiting your animal proteins to lower fat proteins. The classic is salmon and fish. I know that there's some concerns about mercury levels and that sort of thing. So you have to balance that out, obviously. But that Mediterranean diet, olive oils, nuts, and whole grains. So trying to avoid that white rice, which I love. We've got a rice cooker here. We eat it all the time. but trying to throw some farro in there or some bulgur or other types of
Quinoa.
products that, quinoa that are complete proteins. Those are going to be really, really valuable in making sure that your body is properly fueled while you are engaging in this increase in physical activity. And you shouldn't be surprised that when you start working out more, that you're going to feel more hungry. But if you can put the right stuff in, it's going to fuel your body in a way that's going to get you the results that you want, and not necessarily take it back a step.
Yeah. And I think that Mediterranean diet, right? We know a couple of really key things about it. One is that it does help to reduce the risk for things like Alzheimer's by up to 23%, which is just a crazy statistic.
Yeah.
The other thing that's so important is, when you're starting to remove some of those refined sugars and carbs from your diet and eating this more Mediterranean style, your gut health changes too.
Oh, yeah.
So adding things like kombucha or sauerkraut or
fiber, just using one of the fiber products that are on the market. And I, as a user of those products, I can tell you that it is fantastic. Not only does it have a correlation to reduced heart disease, because you're getting more fiber in your diet, but it really allows you to have much better gut health. All of that becomes really critical. The stuff that you put in your body becomes essential. And the third piece of the puzzle is really this idea about rest and sleeping. I know that you've got a bunch of items here that you've identified first. Do you want to just run through them?
Yeah. So in terms of, first of all, we want to make sure that we're getting that like 7 to 8 hours of good sleep. And we really want to be going through our sleep cycles like 3 to 4 times throughout the course of the evening. So
what do you mean by sleep? What do you mean by sleep cycle? Tell us more about that.
So we've got different stages that we go through throughout the course of the evening. We've actually got 4 different stages of sleep. And so we want to cycle through, and it's not just you spend time in stage 1 and then you move to stage 2 and then stage 3 and stage 4, and then you're done for the evening. You actually rotate through those cycles 3 to 4 times throughout the course of the evening. What we really want to make sure that we're doing, right? We've got kind of our lighter sleep cycles on the beginning front, and then stage 3 and stage 4, you've got your deep sleep in stage 3. And we really want to maximize our deep sleep, because that's going to be where we're getting a lot of that healing and repairing that's being done. So I like to kind of think that, there's almost a cleaner that comes into your brain in the middle of the night, and it's like dusting out the cobwebs and doing some vacuuming. And, so we get a lot of that repair.
It's defragmenting your disk drive.
100. That's exactly what it is. We want to make sure that we maximize that stage, right? And we want to, each time we kind of are looking for between 20 to 40 minutes. And then we'll move on to stage 4. What I found when I started looking at my own data was that I was not getting into REM. So that's stage 4, right? So deep sleep, stage 3, REM sleep, stage 4. Stage 4 is really important for all of our cognitive function and like our alertness and our memory and our learning. And so I was finding that I was pretty fuzzy when I was waking up. And so I started to dig a little bit deeper into where I was getting to in my sleep stages. And I found that between like 5 a.m. and like 7 a.m. is where I get a lot of my REM. So I'm not cycling throughout the course of the evening the way that somebody else might. So the reason that that's important is, one, I didn't know that until I started looking at the data, and I could dig in and I could decide, is 5 a.m. the right time for me to wake up? Or do I want to push that more to 7 a.m.? Do I want to reconfigure my go to bed and my wake up times? And then I asked myself the question, what else can I be doing to improve my REM sleep throughout the course of the night? Can I get it to move to earlier in the cycles? And can I boost that up? We want to end the course of the evening around an hour and a half total, an hour and 45 minutes worth of REM throughout the course of the night. So one of the things that I did was I started listening to binaural beats before going to bed.
That's my favorite DJ.
Binaural beats.
Yeah.
You play some good stuff.
I think I saw them in Ibiza.
You're punny, real punny. So yeah, binaural beats, they're incredible. Do you use them?
No, what are they?
No. So
I don't know this one. This is new to me. Tell me what this one is.
Well, it's one of my favorites. So it's bilateral stimulation inside of the brain. So what you want to
Okay.
be doing is you want to be listening to the sounds, the tones with your headphones in, because you're going to get different hertz levels in each of your ears. And
Mhm.
the difference between the hertz levels that are playing is going to give you the tone. So for example, like delta, if you listen to delta waves, that's going to help you get into deep sleep. If you listen to theta waves, you're going to get into REM. And so you can use binaural beats for a number of different things. If you're trying to improve your focus throughout the course of the day, you can use binaural beats. If you're trying to get deeper sleep or REM, right? So 20 minutes before going to bed, I will listen to these binaural beats. And what I saw happen in the data was that I was getting into REM earlier in the evening.
Hmm.
And so I was improving the overall time that I was spending in REM, and it was easier for me to get into deep sleep in REM. So, there's a lot that you can do. All right. So Michael, we've talked a lot about the physical component of what it is that we can do. Let's shift over to emotional. Let's talk
Yeah.
about some of the things that are necessary in order to keep our brains active, healthy, but more importantly, paying attention to the quality of the emotions that we have on a daily basis and the impact that that has.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is maybe one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle. There's a reason why mindfulness, and some people call it meditation, some people call it mindfulness. I think that there are definitions for both of them, but really, there's a reason why this is getting taught in schools today, because the earlier you start to develop this capability, this habit, this, it's not called a perfect, it's called a practice. The earlier that we do that, the greater our ability is going to be to manage ourselves. So, this idea of mindfulness, at least for me, as I've entered into this age where there's this low lying anxiety of my parents getting older, there's the low lying anxiety of missing my kids' childhood and not doing a good job. There's a low level anxiety, and sometimes all of these are high level anxiety as well. The anxiety of will I have enough money to retire? Will I be able to do the things that I want to do in retirement? Those are all sort of thoughts and feelings that are floating around just consistently. And I think I shared this with you the other day. An example is I was driving home from the airport after visiting a client in Florida, and I saw a car on the road that I really like, and I saw the car, and I said, "Oh, there's one of those cars. I really like that car." And then immediately after that, I had a feeling of sadness and anxiety, which was driven by a thought of I'm never going to be able to afford that car. It's an expensive car. It's an
Yeah.
electric vehicle called a Rivian. Some people might know it, right? We're talking about, it's almost the 80, 90,000. You can make them $100,000 vehicles. Now, that sort of mindfulness piece and being aware of the sequencing of my thinking around that has been something that I've been practicing and really trying to develop a greater I'm going to call it a skill because I think it is a skill. It's something that you have to learn to do. Greater skill and awareness of what's happening there. So, do you want to work with me and unpack that? And maybe make it make sense for the audience here a little bit.
One of the things that I find fascinating, right, is this choice to no longer drink alcohol and become aware of how you are feeling and what those emotions are, right? When we buffer to cover up feeling the sadness or feeling right, that's an act that's socially acceptable by so many. And
Oh
when you
yeah.
start to strip away and decide to no longer do that buffering activity for
Mhm.
a number of different reasons, right? You could just decide that you no longer want to drink because it's got links to cancer, right? For
Right.
whatever
There's
reason.
that.
Right. Yeah. That tiny little thing. But once you remove that buffering and you're able to sit with your emotions a little bit differently than you had before, you start to see things. And so I'm
Yeah.
curious, as you were going through this experience, what were the things that you were noticing that were different, or maybe they were the same as before you stop drinking?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I was talking with a friend of mine the other day, and he said, great thing about getting sober is that you feel better.
Mm.
And one of the things also about being sober is that you feel better,
Yeah.
meaning that you actually feel your feelings in a more significant, visceral way. Um, and so I think to answer your question, it's being aware of the patterns of thinking. So in this instance where I was driving home and I saw this vehicle, um, and it triggered this pattern of thinking, feeling in me, in that, oh, it's a great car, but man, I'm never going to have it. And the reason I'm not going to have it is because I'll never make enough money to get it, and blah blah blah. Never mind that I may not even really want that car.
Yeah.
I might aspire to having it, but even if I did have the money to buy it, would I spend my money on that? Abstinence from alcohol, what I think it's provided for me at least is, and to address this idea of buffering, is that it's allowed me to, instead of buffering that feeling of feeling inadequate or unaccomplished or irresponsible, instead of observing that feeling and or observing that thought and being able to say, that doesn't make any sense. Am I supposed to be buying $90,000 cars? Like, addressing the thought pattern
Yeah.
and recognizing it as I can have that thought, but I don't need to own it,
Yeah.
right? It's like, oh, look at that. I can watch it and then say, okay, thanks for visiting. Like, but you don't get to stick around.
You don't get to see the way that I like to think about it is like you're in the car, right? And you're driving the car, your thoughts get to be there and they get to ride shotgun. They just don't get to drive,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
you have the ability to sit there and look at them and observe them and question them, and they can show up and they can make you feel a certain way. But this
Yeah.
idea of managing your emotions more effectively and not buffering to cover up the negative emotions, right? Life is going to be 50-50. Half the time there's going to be negative stuff that's taking place. Half the time there's going to be really great stuff that's taking place. And so how you manage the way that you're interpreting the stuff that's going on determines the quality of your life. Do you want
Yeah.
it to rule how you're showing up, or do you want to take responsibility and take kind of the power back for your emotional well-being?
Yeah, and so for the audience, I think that the takeaway here is, if you want to get started with some mindfulness practices, if you want to stop drinking, it's great. Do it, don't do it, whatever. You don't have to. You can do something as
You just get
simple.
to see, you get to see a lot when you stop covering it up, though. And
Yeah, when you
that's
stop.
anything, right? So it's
Right.
drinking, it's over anything. So it could be
Yeah.
over Netflixing, it could be over social mediaing,
It can
it
be
could
over
be
exercising.
over exercising, overworking, right?
Yeah.
Anytime that you're doing something to try to avoid feeling something else, overwhelm, anxiety, frustration, sadness,
Yeah.
fear.
The other piece of the puzzle is around emotional, is regulating your nervous system.
Yeah.
So when we talk about things like light exposure during the winters, cold exposure, I know, Lindsay, you just got a new toy for your backyard,
Sure
a
did.
cold plunge,
Sure
right?
did.
And then a breath work
Yeah.
exercise, whether it's Wim Hof exercises. And if you don't know Wim Hof, look him up, WIMHOF. These areas. Do we want to talk a little bit about that in your experience with those things?
Yeah, I mean, what I think is really important for our listeners here is this idea that regulating your nervous system, right? Your nervous system is responsible for making sure that everything works, right? Simplification here, but like everything works. And so if we are constantly stuck in a state of stress, right? We talked briefly about the fact that you need to have stress in order to grow and thrive. But if we're in a chronic state of stress, right, we might get stuck in that fight or flight area. And what we want to do is find ways to be able to regulate our nervous system, meaning switch back and forth between fight or flight, and then more of that rest and digest. So the difference between our sympathetic nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous system. And so these things that Michael just talked about are ways that we can start regulating our nervous system so that we have more of that ability to quickly switch back and forth versus getting stuck in one or the other, right? We don't want to be constantly in that sympathetic state of fight or flight where we just are always constantly jacked up and we're reacting to things emotionally from that place of fear in our primitive brain. But we also don't want to be constantly in that state of rest and digest, that parasympathetic state, because that tends to be associated more like with depression and lethargy. So we want to make sure that we are able to go back and forth. And again, the light exposure, cold exposure, breath work, heat exposure, those are some of the ways. Grounding, right? Those are some of the ways that we can just regulate our nervous system. So we are going to be better emotionally prepared to deal with stuff.
Yeah. And I certainly know that there's a lot of press out there right now around heat and cold exposure to sort of contrast therapy and the light therapy, right? A lot of the work that's coming out of the research around getting direct sunlight exposure in the first 15 to 20 minutes of your day can really change your energy levels and your functioning during the day. So, the sun doesn't cost anything. Maybe if you live in Seattle or somewhere, you might have some challenges with that. But
there's still, there's still the research that you're still getting the benefits. You might have to be out there a little bit longer on a super cloudy day, but you're still getting the benefits in that first 10 to 15 minutes that you're talking about. Absolutely. Yeah. Michael, let's talk a little bit about mental. So when you think about mental and longevity, we're talking about a couple of things here. We're talking about cognition. We're also talking about just really focus and attention. So there's a lot of different ways that we can go. I think what's really important for our listeners is, one, just to improve your overall mental state. Everything that we've talked about thus far plays into this category. So even though it's a separate, like it's number 3 on our list, all of the things that you're doing in 1 and 2 are going to be additive to increasing your mental capacity, right? So that's just good to know.
Yeah.
But what are maybe some of the other things that we want to be thinking about here?
Well, continuous learning is really critical. I think even though our brains lose some of its plasticity as it ages, there's certainly a lot of research to show that the more that we engage in continuous learning, and there's so many more opportunities between the availability of YouTube and the internet to everybody in almost in most corners of the United States, at least. But even being able to download information to your phone, take it with you on the go, listening to podcasts, doing puzzles, it's all at the tip of your fingers. To think that we hold in the palm of our hand more computing power than put a person on the moon, in the late 60s is just, it's a remarkable thing. There's a reason why when people enter into retirement homes, that they don't just, most of the good retirement homes are not focused on just letting them sit down and sort of watch TV all the time. They have them doing aerobics or learning a new skill like painting or pottery or low impact, low aerobic activities that people can engage in that might be more physically challenged or have some physical limitations. Because learning new things develops new pathways in the brain. Learning new things gives us the opportunity to exercise parts of ourselves that we might not have had the opportunity to exercise in the past. And that leads to neural growth, and it leads to brain health. So those are really important things. And one of the challenges I think that people have with that is, as we get older, we lose some of our willingness, not everybody, but we lose some of our willingness to engage in play and be a beginner. But this concept that as you get older, that you should know everything is ingrained in us from a very young age. So really taking this approach of having that beginner mindset, that it's okay if I don't know everything. It's okay if I'm not an expert in this. I've never done this before. So it's fine if I need to develop this skill over a period of time, coming to that with a beginner mindset. And then the other part is fixed versus growth mindset. And can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that was more of a new concept to me.
Yeah, so I think that it plays really well into that beginner's mindset, right? If you're coming at something and you have more of a fixed mindset, it is that belief that you should already know that we're born with all of our skills, and that it doesn't matter how much we practice over time, we're either good at something or we aren't. Where a growth mindset is truly having that beginner's mindset, saying, I have the potential to grow. And I think that when we look at those that are entering into retirement, I've had lots of conversations with individuals that will say like, well, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, yeah, you can. Now, there's a difference if we're telling ourselves we can't. I can tell you, technology, it's one of those things that recently, and I've talked a lot about technology with our audience here, but if I'm approaching a new program that I'm needing to learn, I'm like, oh gosh, I'm so bad at technology. Like, I'm just not going to be good at learning how to do this. And once I tell myself, well, that's not true, then I get to work at doing it and like learning it a little bit differently than if I'm telling myself I don't have the ability to learn that new thing. Let's also talk from a social perspective. There needs to be more of this emphasis on building community, especially after we leave the workforce, which is where we tend to get the majority of our communities from. The pandemic definitely changed that dynamic, I think, for a lot of individuals and what they consider to be community. But talk to me a little bit about the impact of not having strong social connections as we age.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of pretty sad statistics about this. It's not a great one. It is said that a lack of social engagement and a strong social network increases the chance of death by all causes of up to 50% more.
Yeah, such a
Which
crazy
is it's a staggering statistic. It's like smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Yeah,
is what that's equivalent to. Think about it. Most of our jobs, at least up until the pandemic, these are 9-to-5 jobs or even more office jobs where you're not getting paid an hourly wage, but you're spending upwards of 35 to 40 to 60 hours a week in the office with people. And when you leave the workforce, sometimes that's your primary social network. The other thing that happened during the pandemic is that there's this concept of the third place. The third place is a place that is not home or work. So for some people, that was their house of worship. For other people, it might have been the local bar, right? There's a reason why pubs have existed and sustained themselves over millennia. For some people, that might be the gym. But it's basically your community that is not your home, and it's not your work. And so we lost that as well.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of people, this expansion of our social network was really inhibited.
For those that may not have had a third place or are, lost their third place during the pandemic, have you gone back? Or are you looking for a way to create that third place for yourself? And if we can stack a couple of things here, it would be great, right? Pickleball, whatever it is, maybe you find something that becomes a community for you, but also at the same time allows you to enter it with a beginner's mindset, so that you can grow and learn over time, but also lose yourself a little bit. That's another piece that's really helpful as we age, is just being able to kind of let go and shed the day and get lost in and be just present in the moment. Thinking about creating that community is one where you can check off a lot of boxes at once.
It's important when you say stacking things, don't forget the part of pickleball being an aerobic exercise, right? So you're really getting this sort of, and it's a mental exercise and it's an emotional exercise. So you're getting the benefit of stacking all of these things on top of each other. So finding those habits, finding those opportunities where you, as a pre-retiree or as a retiree, can really start to get into learning more about yourself and expanding your horizon of what is possible. Kind of brings us to this idea of purpose, right?
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, I think you started this out with Essentially, if we talk to you today about topics that are pretty obvious in nature, that's because some of this stuff is table stakes, right? If you don't know that you're supposed to be eating better or moving more, right, you've probably been living under a rock. But why don't people do the things that they know are going to be important for them?
Yeah. You know, I think that there are a lot of answers to that question, but as it relates to these sort of 5 areas that we've been talking about, what we see is that people that know why they get out of bed in the morning are more likely to live more engaging, productive, and healthy lives. So, all of these things, whether it's developing a mental resilience practice or developing a habit of exercising or going to the gym or whatever it is, right? Eating better. We know from research that if we connect those choices to something bigger than just the choice itself. So, yes, I know that it's good to go to the gym, but if it's only about going to the gym because I know it's good for me,
Yeah.
then the likelihood of me maintaining that activity is lower than if I connect it to something that represents who I want to be as a person.
Yeah.
If I look ahead 30 years from myself, I know that I don't want to have to be working with a physical therapist to maintain muscle mass. I want to have built that up over the 30 years from now until then, and really make sure that it's part of who I am as a human being, because I don't want to be, and my parents aren't a burden to me, but I don't want to be a burden to anybody else.
Yeah.
I would like to be able to ski until I'm 80 or older. I would like to be able to ride my bike at that age and not have to worry about, maintaining my proprioception or my balance and being able to manage a bicycle. So things like that. And then also really being able to enjoy the companionship of my children, of my wife, of my friends, and not be in a medical assisted facility or some kind of facility that requires me to not do the things that I want that I want for myself. So when I go to the gym, it's not just about maintaining this magnificent figure that I'm blessed with. It's also about really ensuring that I'm trying to live my life in alignment with the values that I have and the purpose that I have for myself. So having a why, like why I get out of bed in the morning, and that's difficult. This is not something that happens overnight. You have to really struggle with this, I think, for a lot of people. Really identifying what are my values, what does it mean to be a good communicator? If we go back to the idea of mental and emotional resiliency, what does it mean for me to be a good communicator? What does it mean for me to be a good listener? What does it mean for me to provide value to my clients and be a good father? What do those look like? We can say those words,
Yeah.
but what does it mean? What does it look like when it's happening? What does it look like when it's not happening? So that I can check myself in that regard. And then really living not by accident, but I think a phrase that you turned me on to is living life by design and not being a passenger. Comes back to that. It comes to being a driver in
Yeah.
what I want to show up as.
I love this idea that Peter Attia has talked a lot about, the centenarian decathlon, right? Where you think about the things that you want to be able to do when you're 100 years old and tying that to the identity that you have, right? You talked about, yes, maintaining your physique, but more importantly, being able to do the things to take care of yourself and not necessarily be a burden. So having that identity based versus just a goal based and being able to say, I want to work out 5 times a week or whatever, right? I am going to work out 5 times a week because I am someone who works out for the purpose of making sure that I'm capable of doing these things that matter to me. Right. So I think that purpose is so critical there. Michael, I'd like to kind of close out our session today thinking about maybe some of the really quick hits, the things that we want our audience to take away. So what would be the first thing that you think, people need to do in order to get started?
think regardless of how old you are, regardless of what your physical condition is, regardless of your where you're starting or who you are today, it's managing your mind. That is the thing that you have the most control over. You may not even have control over your feelings, and that is okay. It is okay to feel all the feelings that you are feeling. It is more important to be able to say, what do I do with these feelings now that I'm having them? So managing your mind is about being aware of those feelings, making deliberate choices about how you want to act as a result, and understanding what are the we call them triggers, but they're really the thoughts that are providing those feelings to us. So
Yeah.
I think managing the mind is maybe the number one thing, and I would encourage people to start small. I mean, it can be a matter of just journaling. It can be a matter of just sitting with your thoughts and observing them as they go by. There are 1,001 meditation and mindfulness apps that are on your phones or the internet or in your bookstore. You can avail yourselves of those things, but start small. I always tell my clients, so let's start with the smallest amount of sustainable change. We're not looking for you to lose, we're not losing 50 pounds. We're not looking
Yeah.
for you to start meditating and have a 20-minute a day meditation. Now, let's start with 30 seconds. If you can do
Yeah.
30 seconds once a day, then tomorrow maybe you can do 45. And maybe after that, you do a minute. And maybe after that, you do a minute and a half. But whatever it is that you can sustain, let's celebrate those wins and start small. So that's number one.
Yeah, I love that, the bare minimum, right? What is
Yeah,
the bare minimum that I'm willing to do today? And maybe it is 30 seconds, maybe it's 5 minutes, like whatever it is,
that's
like
okay.
no matter what, that's what I'm
It's okay.
doing.
You're doing, the important thing is the doing.
Yeah. The consistency, right? We talked a little bit.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
yes.
I would say, so if my number two, right behind, and I would totally agree with mindfulness, my number two would be move your body.
Mm.
Right. So we talked a lot about the importance and how that even helps you from regulating your emotions and what that does. So I would say bare minimum again is how do you increase that zone 2 activity that you have on a regular basis, right? We would love to get 150 to 180 minutes a week. However, right, what is the bare minimum? If maybe it's just you start to take that 10-minute walk after dinner, what if you're increasing it, then that's a positive. So stepping up that zone 2 movement. Michael, what would
No
you close
question.
us out with?
Yeah, I would say the last bit is start to think about what kind of stuff you put in your body. You've seen a couple times where I've one thing we didn't talk about, Lindsay, that I feel
Hydration.
like we should have
Yeah,
is hydration.
hydration.
Like, so when you wake up in the morning, drink, drink 8 ounces of water first thing in the morning. And try and drink, what do we say, about 2 of these a day?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Everybody's chronically dehydrated, and we oftentimes think that we need to just increase our water. And yes, depending on where you live, we're in higher elevation. So Michael's in
Yeah.
Boulder, I'm in Denver. So throughout the course of the day, you might see me get up to a gallon's worth of water, but in some instances, that can actually be too much. Right. So we want to be focusing on getting our water from sources like fruits and vegetables. Right. What is your water intake through food? And also potentially adding supplements like Irish sea moss that can also help with
Oh,
hydration. All right, Michael, this has been an incredible conversation. I know that you and I could talk for hours upon hours upon hours on topics, and hopefully our listeners will be interested in hearing more from us, because we're going to come back and we're going to do a lot more. But I just want to say thank you so much for the time today. Thanks for adding your expertise in. Thank you for being one of our newest coaches to the platform. So everyone get excited. You can start to do some work with Michael one-on-one. You'll also be seeing him in these sessions. So Michael, thank you.
thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here. And I just love the conversations that we get to have.
I know they're so fun, aren't they?
Yeah.
So for everybody, as you're looking to dive deeper into these concepts, I want you to remember you have a ton of resources that are available to you right now. So I'm going to link all of those into the show notes inside of the email that you're getting and inside of the client portal. But we have a wonderful video series all about habits that I think is really going to help you. Some of the stuff we talked about today, you can tie into the science of dopamine and how to form a habit. You also have the resources, the awareness audit, the life by design worksheet, and then also your retirement identity and purpose workbook. So lots of resources. Of course, you can always come back to us and get some one-on-one coaching as well. All right. Again, Michael, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to talking to you all soon.